and welcome to Worth Live, and thank you all for joining this week's final episode of the Next Normal series on how women give differently. Firstly, I hope you and your loved ones are well during what continues to be a challenging time for so many people. I'm Juliet Scott-Croxford, CEO at Worth Media, and I'm thrilled to be joined by our special guest today, Adrienne Arsht, business leader and impact philanthropist, and Kathleen Entwistle, managing director and private wealth advisor at Morgan Stanley Private Wealth Management. Hello, both.
Hello.
Hello.
Great to see you. Before we get going, I just wanted to share a bit about Worth. Our intention is to create conversations that help inspire and inform our community, many of whom are business leaders, entrepreneurs, and investors who want to leave a positive impact on the world and to help create a more inclusive and equal economy and society for the benefit of everyone. And we call that Worth Beyond Wealth. So we hope you enjoy this session and find it valuable. I think it's a very fitting topic to end on. Forward thinking has really been the essence of this series, The Next Normal. And over the past year, we've been looking ahead to what the world looks like in this new environment that we're now all living in. To conclude the series, we're with business leader and philanthropist Adrienne Arsht to discuss her perspectives on why women give differently, what inspires her to give, and what it's meant for her that one of her most recent gifts has led to the Metropolitan Museum of Art becoming the single largest art museum to offer 100% paid internships. And there's lots of other examples that we'll share. A few housekeeping rules before we get started, which I know everyone is familiar with by now. This is a conversation. We do welcome questions from you. If you change your chat function at the bottom of the screen to all panelists and attendees and share any comments or questions in there, I'll see that and we'll weave it into the conversation. We'll also leave some time at the end to cover some of those questions as well. So let's get started. Firstly, a warm welcome to you both. Adrienne, before we get started, love to hear how you're doing personally, but also if you could just share briefly about your background and how you became involved in philanthropy in the first place.
Well, thank you. Personally, I'm just fine. I have been vaccinated, and I guess I'm 79 years old, so I qualified in some quadrant in some place. And I'm just fine, thank you. I think philanthropy is really, or giving back is part of the human DNA. And I often say that we all are here on Earth. We pay rent really for the time we're here. And I've been very fortunate, I say, to live in a very high rent district. And I have a lot of giving to do, but I do believe it is the essence of being a human being.
Thank you, Adrienne. And Kathy, welcome. I'd love you to introduce yourself. It's been brilliant having you as a partner on this series for the past year, but also your involvement in philanthropy through both yourself and your clients.
Sure. Thank you, Juliet. And I have also loved doing this for the last year. And what a great guest and topic to end on, Adrienne, philanthropy, and to have you here too. It's always been important to me to give to others, volunteering for my whole life in many, many different ways, on boards, in kind, showing up, serving suppers, whatever it takes. And then and as we all know, when you give, you get more back. It's the craziest thing. It's so unexpected. You think, oh, here I am doing for others. And the personal satisfaction or growth that you get back in return is immeasurable. So that's been a big win. For clients, I also love to talk to our clients about giving and impacting, and it's always been an important topic for them. So whether it's, again, they have a special cause that's important to them, or where they're giving time or money or whatever it may be, or if it's, general conversations, we believe in sharing family values, having conversations, multi-generational conversations about what's important and what kind of impact want to make in the world. And I do believe that women generally tend to be the leaders on impact and giving. And sometimes we've taken a seat not at the table and we've given the credit to our male counterparts, which is okay. But I love the idea that more recently we're seeing women really owning the philanthropy effort. And I'd say Melinda Gates is a perfect example. I do believe that Bill Gates has been quoted as saying that he would not have been nearly as involved in philanthropy if it was not for Melinda. So I think that's a great sort of example. And for our clients, having those conversations, qualitative conversations about things that are most important to them is super valuable. And that's really where we are with our clients, whether it's giving by money, appreciated stock, donor advised funds, foundations, whatever it may be.
Thank you, Kathy. And Adrienne, before we get into, and Kathy, into the conversation about how women give differently than men, Adrienne, how do you view philanthropy, and what's your approach been to this area?
I'm not sure I understand your question as to how you approach philanthropy. There are needs in the world, and those that I find where I take it on is where nobody else is involved. I tend to, whether it's the support here in Miami, where I am now, the Performing Arts Center, which was going bankrupt and nobody wanted anything to do with it. And so I made my $30 million gift to the creation of the two centers, the Latin America Center that nobody would ever do before, and another 30 million for the Resilient Center. I pick areas that no one else has thought of as important, and the joy is to see later on just how many people join.
Yeah. And I think we know that women give differently than men, and I think you're a great example of that. But can you speak to how women give differently and what you've observed?
When I say give differently, I think there are several. I think that there's a statistic that you all have about more women give than men, and I find that I'd like a definition. Meaning, do 100 women give versus 10 men? But the amount, the difference is staggering. Women give, and my late husband, former wife, or first wife, they were both about 30 years older than I. So she would, every time she got a postcard in the mail from the Humane Society and the Cancer Society and the many others, she would send a check for $10. So if you wanted to say that she and many like her did give, then in numbers, but in the dollar amount, it's almost not in the same breath. I mean, the Chronicle of Philanthropy every year does the 50 top dollar amounts of giving. And my first year when I did 30 million for the Performing Arts Center and many other gifts, I was 39 out of 50. And I was the first living woman. The other two women higher up in the list were the estates they had given out of their estate. So I take strong issue with the concept of women give more than men. In dollars, it's not even the same breath. And I think women who run foundations, whether it's a Melinda Gates or Elizabeth Alexander at Carnegie, and so many women, Judy Rodin did for a while. That's a very different aspect than having really earned it and make the gifts. And women absolutely do not put their name. They want to be anonymous, and they're almost hostile.
That's interesting. And why do you think that because I agree, because also you see Bezos' ex-wife, Mackenzie, she's obviously giving a lot as well. But to your point, it's sort of the circumstance that she's been put into, I guess.
Yes. Examples, alma maters, men give in the whatever 10 figures or whatever the numbers are to their alma maters. Women don't even get up to 6 figures.
Yeah. And as well, women tend to give different kinds of organizations, specifically more secular organizations. They tend to volunteer more, which I think is what you were describing, Kathy.
Yeah.
Why is that in your experience?
Well, before, if you don't mind if I just jump in a second,
Yeah.
I agree with Adrienne that that has definitely been the traditional way, and women like Adrienne and some of the other women she mentioned are making the change and making the difference and sort of leading the way in terms of showing other women how they can come up behind them and do the same. And so I would say Melody Hobson.
Yep. Oh gosh, yes. Oh, Melody,
I mean,
fantastic. Absolutely.
Here she just made such a huge gift to her alma mater, which has, like you said, that hasn't been done in the past. So it's nice to see.
I'm saying with women, it's totally anecdotal. You can count any of us.
Yes.
And that's all I'm saying, that to make generalizations about women give the same as, and I don't think Melody or I are doing it to set an example. I think I would say, though, to women to put their names on things, whenever you get, in the olden days, we actually had letters, and on the left side of every letter was the list of board members, or if it's a committee of some sort, people who are on that particular organization. And I always look to see, are there people on it whom I know? I can, if they're involved, then I'm thinking it's something I don't have to vet. And so putting your name on something is not about ego. It's putting your money where your mouth is, and it's showing others what matters, your decision about what matters. And it sets a tone for its value, not that you've done it.
I think that's interesting, and I'd also describe you as trailblazers. I mean, I think what you're doing, Adrienne, and what Melody is doing is hopefully sort of setting an example that more women can follow. Kathy, were you going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say that anytime, the purpose of giving is to give and to make a difference and an impact in something that you believe strongly in. But the second effect of it is that you inspire others, whether or not you intend to or not, you do. And that is where the snowball effect comes in terms of, being able to leverage one person's donations, not only with the incredible amount of money that they're giving, but also with the act of giving and demonstrating that and then growing that. And if we can find 10 more Adriennes in the world, like how amazing would that be, that are inspired by Adrienne, and now they're doing the same, and so forth, right? That's sort of the concept. So, and putting your name on the building, again, I know from being on both sides of the table, either with clients who are giving and getting their name on something, or with being on a board where we're asking somebody to give and maybe they're getting their name on something. Typically, the donor is not as interested in having their name on it, but what the message that's shared with that person is, by you putting your name on it, you are inspiring others to give as well. And that's usually the purpose. It's not an ego issue. It's more of a sort of a challenge to others or an inspiration to others.
It could be, but I think that so much of where naming, when you start a campaign, as you well know, you have a list of naming opportunities from the gate to the door to the building. And I think that inspiring others is a side effect, but I think it's done a lot to say, this is what matters to me. And when you do that, then a side effect is to inspire others to care about what you care about and the value. I think that giving, or male and female, has a lot to do also with the view of money. And I'd say all women, myself included, or I'll start with myself, are afraid of being poor, always afraid of being a bag lady at whatever level of money. I'm still afraid that tomorrow I'll lose it all and I'll be a bag lady. And there was a moment in my life when there was a bit of business precariousness. And since I was running a bank, I said, well, if all creators, I'll go out and be a bank teller. I had a fallback. With men, with males, there's a genetic confidence that they will always be able to provide, whether it's they'll get another job, they'll buy another company. In fact, when men sell companies, they tend to go out and buy another one. And
so Adrienne, does that speak to risk and the view, or I guess the willingness of different genders to take risk when it comes to giving?
Absolutely. Men not only have testosterone, and women have estrogen and oxytocin. There's fight or flight, and the male and the female are constructed differently in that regard. But risk taking is much stronger in men. I'm a huge Formula One racing fan, followed it, gone to races, and went to a track to learn about it, driving, and talked to one of the driver teachers and I asked, why are there really almost no women Formula One drivers, or any of them? And his comment was he'd much prefer to teach women because they follow instructions and learn. But if you're going to back somebody on the track, you want somebody who takes risks to the very edge, because that's the competition. And are they going to push themselves to what many of us would look at as stupid? But for men, risk balances, in a sense, their confidence that it will all work out.
So interesting. And Adrienne, I'd love to go into kind of what inspires you to give, because you mentioned earlier, and there's a couple of areas that you've done some significant donors in, but you mentioned earlier you look at areas that haven't necessarily got the support that they need. What inspires you to give, and how do you align your giving to certain organizations?
Well, I think that some of it is, I think I'm bold enough to say that I think when I am passionate about something, I want to really get involved in the whole thing. And I guess you could say, I'm not sure how well I play with others. And when I have an inspiration, when I see a need, I like a team with me, but I tend to want to barrel ahead with all the thoughts and ideas that I have on the two centers. I would say on the other side, on the two centers, I make it very clear. And in the donor's agreement, it's very clear that I have nothing to do with content. And I don't believe a donor should have anything to do with the content. I serve on the board of Lincoln Center, the Kennedy Center, and here the Arsht Center. And people will talk about, oh, they have this particular show or this particular artist. How can they get that person or organization booked at the center? And I give them the name of the artistic director. I say, I have absolutely nothing to do with content. So there's a very important line that I think, there's the great Broadway show, Bullets Over Broadway, and the classic where the man funds a show so that his wife, his daughter, whatever, can be in it. And so whatever I give, I still am very, very clear that I'm hands off. If they want to listen to me and do it, that's fine. But
and you don't just give in the arts space, do you? You give in
no,
other
I think
areas
I've
as
actually
well.
moved on from that. I've done a great deal of it, as you said. And in fact, at Lincoln Center, I did give $10 million there in their campaign. And the stage in Alice Tully Hall is named after me. Alice Tully Hall is almost the only building that one can think of, really, certainly in the large building named after a woman. And to what Kathy had said about the joy of giving, I find that when many of my friends who are artists perform on the Arsht stage, they'll send me a selfie. They are saying, I'm playing on your stage. And it is satisfying. I mean, it does give you a real sense that I made a difference. And as to Kathy's point, I think it is, some people say that there is no such thing as an unselfish act. In other words, when you give, as she said, the joy of giving comes back double. So it's a wonderful argument or discussion. Is there such thing as an unselfish act? But yes, I've taken on in the policy area, certainly on Latin America. And that came from my time both living here in Miami and in the turn of this century, and a belief that the Latin America, the other half of our hemisphere, was being disregarded. I think we, almost anywhere, tend to focus on wherever there's a war. I think most people would know about Latin America because of the Falkland Islands, but other than that, and yet it is the most significant economic partner that we have. And the population in the United States, the percentage of Hispanics, Latinos is growing, and it's time to pay attention. And so
and what does that, and so how did that manifest itself in supporting those communities? What
we
what
do
did
a
you
lot
do
of
there?
work. We convene. We've done a lot of work with Venezuela, with Venezuela, and equally, but with Colombia over many years when it was overpowered by the FARC, and there was fighting continuously. And we housed and brought together and convened a number of the Colombians and others to help work out the peace. We now have on migrants, really trying to work on that, which the Biden administration has said that the Northern Triangle, what we would call Central America, Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala, it's where the fiercest problems with gangs are, and that the migrants, refugees, flee from there. And the administration is seeking to go to the heart of it. What is causing them to flee and how to work it out? So it's those kinds of things.
I'm curious for both of you, actually, have you seen any shifts in the way people think about philanthropy or give as a result of the pandemic and the incidents of last year through the social and racial unrest and process? Have you seen any shifts in the way people are thinking about what causes they support and how they do that? Kathy?
I definitely see more of an interest in certain areas. I do think that people who have traditionally given still are going to maintain those areas that are most important to them. As Adrienne said, she had a very generous gift down, I think you mentioned earlier, in Miami, into the is it the symphony
The Performing Arts Center.
Performing
It had
Arts
just been
Center.
built and was not well managed, and was within 2 years was going to go bankrupt. And I believe that the city deserved, and since Performing Arts Center, and because the bank that I owned was here in Miami, I did believe on this, that some of the money that I got from the sale should certainly stay in the community, because that had made my bank viable.
I love that. I love the way you just connected those two. And I do find that, you know, when communities support each other, or when you're supported by your community, I see a lot of people want to go back to that community and lift that community up with them. So it's a perfect example.
I think certainly with alma maters,
Mm-hmm.
people really, their college experience or their graduate school experience is the community that nurtured them. And so much of the giving, I think, that goes back to their school, which was for many such a formative time, and they want to carry that forward.
Absolutely.
And going back to the difference between women and men, and I know sort of Melody is an example of that on the female side, but it tends to be men that are more directing their giving to alma maters, isn't it?
Yes, but I would also say that men just to anything, they give so much more. And
Right.
if you take the list of the Fortune 100 top wealthiest people, it is basically all male. If you take income, the top earners, the top 50 or even 100 men, and then you have the list, which just gets put out, I think, Forbes or Fortune, forgive me for which one I've messed up, that the women, the top women in earnings would start maybe at number 50 on the list of men. And so there is the income disparity. I'm not saying the women are paid less. That's a whole other story, but that's not about what this is, but the disparity is there. And so men do have the billionaires, the Billionaire Boys Club, otherwise known as the pledge, where you have to be a billionaire to be a part of it. They're basically all men in that. And so the wealth is there.
Well, I think it's interesting too. I just read an article this week, actually, and they were talking about Jeff Bezos's ex-wife, and I'm going to forget her name. I apologize.
Mackenzie
Scott, yes.
Mackenzie. So I think Mackenzie potentially is one of the few women that did take the pledge. I believe in 2019, just a couple of months after her divorce. And they're all talking, you know, there's so much talk around how, you know, she's like putting him to shame with the amount of money that she has given away, and is been doing quite a bit of. 2020 was tremendous, the amount of money that was given away last year by Mackenzie. And I wonder too, I don't know, Adrienne, what do you think? Do you prefer to give money away? I mean, obviously you do, while you're alive and you can enjoy and see the fruits of your labor and your impact. I mean, tell us a little bit about what that feels like for you.
I don't really, I mean, good question. And it's one of those, I think it's almost something to figure out, meaning, and my mother had the same theory of wanting to give away as much as she could before she died. That's a great theory. It's what I want to do too. The issue is, I don't know when I'm going to die. And therefore, and again, that goes back to my comment about myself being afraid of being poor.
Yes.
And being a bag lady. So I keep trying to figure out how much money do I need to have, my running rate, but for how long?
True.
So Go ahead.
Yeah, and Adrienne, I was going to say, I've had, and I have clients who are quite wealthy, but maybe not nearly as wealthy as you, but quite wealthy. And everybody has the same fear. It is so unbelievable. We all have the same fear that we're going to outlive our money, no matter how much money we have.
Now you're talking about your female clients.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'd say we rest our case. That is exactly my point. And if you start with that, my comment about women not giving as much as men is not a criticism. I fight against my double X chromosomes. I have the fear, but I push through it. The other part of it is, and as I say, I know that worst case, I can become a bank teller. And I just ignore, I have some financial advisors, and I've just basically said, don't let me give away beyond my self-maintenance. When of course you don't know what your costs are going to be. But the oxytocin, the estrogen, the nurturing that's so powerful for women, the Grameen Bank, which you probably all know was it Pakistan, at which women, the giving circles, let me go back and say, women don't borrow money. Women are not comfortable with debt. You all probably remember there were women's banks that were created. I forget, it started in New York, the Women's Bank of New York, but there were women's banks created to take care of women or reach out to them, not take care of them. And they all failed. And my point would be, I wish you'd asked me first, I would have told you, you don't have any clients. Women in general don't borrow money. Women are very uncomfortable with debt. And I found in my banking years, and Kathy, maybe you see the same, a woman in business, if she has a warehouse, she'll pay rent on the warehouse. I would try to get them to buy it, have a mortgage, then you'll own something, you'll have tax credit. A mortgage is a debt, and it is scary. Debt for men is another kind of a chip. For men, traded favors. I ask you to give a contribution to my charity or to my political whatever, and you do. I live knowing you're going to come back to me with something. You may come back to me and say, I want tickets to the Knicks, or I want front row seats to the Knicks Heat game. But traded favors are fabulous currency among men. They're debt and great deal of discomfort to women.
And that fear of debt, I'm interested in the different generations and whether we're seeing any changes with a younger generation around the how comfortable they are taking on debt and thinking about it in that way. And Kathy, I don't know whether are you seeing any shift in that sort of mindset for women?
The interesting thing is, I agree with Adrienne, traditionally women do not want to take on debt, and I still think that it applies. What the debt that I'm seeing, Adrienne, is the college debt, the law school debt. These student loans are just unbelievable. And I'm speaking to a lot of women about it, and they're just trying to wrap their heads around it and understand. Nobody had that conversation with them before they went to college about what taking on student debt means and what the cost of that is. So it's a different type of debt, but having conversations of, if you make a plan to pay off that debt, okay, fine. But like Adrienne was saying, there's some debt that have benefits to you, borrow, and you can make more money with the money that you're borrowing. I don't know, from a student debt standpoint, is it supposed to be that your income after college is supposed to make it up? I'm not so sure. There's not any tax benefit. There's a lot of conversation around student debt and should it be wiped out or not wiped out. I don't know where you, Juliet, stand on this, or Adrienne. I'm a big believer in like responsibility and owning like sort of what is in front of you. And but I could see wiping out the interest payments on the debt and just paying down the debt. That might be a good solution. I don't know.
Well, I would say that I can't speak to the younger generation, but my hypothesis is that these differences are genetic or gender-based, and that the home nurturing, not taking on debt, will remain across generations. Ernst & Young has a Entrepreneur of the Year award. They do it now. I think it goes global. It starts with 6 or 9 areas in the United States. And within that, they have it in healthcare. There are different categories, and it pyramids up to the final competition. And I was chosen in finance as an entrepreneur. And I think there were, I was the only one out of, there were 9 categories, a winner and 2 runners up. So out of 27, but my point is, every man, who, when he won, he thanked his family for putting up with his long hours living over the garage and maxing out all his credit cards and borrowing from relatives. And that is in that nature. And to be an entrepreneur requires a lot of financial risk, a lot of asks. And it's a predominantly male field. And I won't go down that rabbit hole for the moment. But what you said, Kathy, about student debt, as you may know, recently I gave $5 million to the Metropolitan Museum to fund all of their interns. And it's the largest museum now with at least 100 paid interns. And last year, before my gift, there were 300 applicants. And this year there were 1,000. And I tell the story that my father, when he was at law school, he was a top student, and he was asked to join the law review. But he couldn't give the time for that because he had to earn money just to, if it wasn't even student debt there, just for his daily. And he hitchhiked from Philadelphia back to Wilmington to work. And so this movement for paid interns, which in another area levels the playing field of giving those who either have so much student debt that they couldn't possibly work for free. It brings in a whole new, 1,000 new people or 600 new people that will get baseline experience and be able to move up in ways that they never could before.
That's interesting, Adrienne. I'm interested in your upbringing, and how much is what your father did and how your family gave driving your decisions around giving now?
Again, I say it's a part of the DNA. It was the heritage for just, I always knew that we talked about giving. We used to meet as a family. I had a sister, and the 4 of us would get together near Christmas and decide where we were making our gifts. And we always joked that my mother, my sister, and I each had 1 vote, and Daddy had 4. But it was not taking it over, but we voiced it, what we thought. He and Mother knew what they wanted to do, but it was always an element. And again, I'm talking, as Kathy has said, it's just a part of who we are.
Adrienne, I love that you just said that story, because Juliet knows this. I advise clients to have family conversations. I usually say the Thanksgiving table, but of where they want to, to set time and allot a dollar amount for each member of the family. It doesn't have to be a big dollar amount.
Yeah.
And say, come to the table, be prepared to present on who you would like to make a donation to and why, and the family will vote on it. And it's just a great way to understand what your other family members view as important causes and issues, and brings about great discussion. And also, gosh, I mean, Juliet, way back at the family conference back in Half Moon Bay, I talked on philanthropy, and that conversation about helping bring different generations together and bringing families together through shared values. Like, that is one of the best ways to keep families intact together, is emphasizing those shared values.
And you asked about the COVID pandemic, about giving. And here I would talk about the arts, which, I mean, many areas got completely shut down, but absolutely all performing arts, from concerts to ballets to theater to chorus, everything shut down. And it's not just the performers. We know, in the theater or the opera, you have, 3 people managing the wigs, the dresses, 3 stagehands. I mean, it's vast. No income immediately, and the Actors Fund and other organizations sought funding for those in need. But apropos of what Kathy was saying about the younger generation, whoever they may be, I think clearly there are changes to what they focus on. Not that they wouldn't do their alma mater, but there are a lot of social causes, social impact philanthropy, social giving that has come about. I mean, I think the pandemic showed a lot of the holes in the safety net, just feeding people. And I think it is the younger generation, whoever they are, that is much more focused on those needs and digging in.
I've got one more question, Adrienne, before there's quite a lot of questions from the audience, which I want to make sure we get to. But how important is proximity when you think about giving? So the closeness to the cause, and in your example of the gift to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, connecting with the interns or connecting directly with the people that are trying to drive these causes forward.
Well, as to the Metropolitan Museum, talking about my interest in resilience, I had been working with them through Lee Mortimer Met Live Arts, but great art comes out of disasters. Donald Saunders has a whole series of disaster paintings, but wars, crises, battles, shipwrecks inspire artists. Bill T. Jones, or the
pandemics,
art that's going to come from these terrible times is spectacular. So I had been involved with the Met, studying a lot about resilience and looking at their different collections of items that show aspects of resilience, and had been talking to them and other museums, including the entire Smithsonian, that they would create curated tours through museums with the theme being resilience. And as you walk through the museum, you might find a mummy in one place and armor, which, as somebody said, is the original, whatever it is, PPE. And so that my involvement was that. But as to closeness, I did have to think about that a lot. When my parents died, they left about the largest private foundation in Delaware. Delaware is a small state. And their requirement was that they left everything to this foundation. It must be used in Delaware. And I had begged them to let me use it where I was, because to monitor it, to oversee, be involved. So right after they died, I started I subscribed to the Wilmington Morning News. This was before Biden, and the Wilmington News really was on the up every day. But I tried to find something that I could connect with. And there's a large Latin population in Delaware. The lower 2 counties are farming, and it's very, very large. So I defined that my foundation would fund the needs of the Hispanic community in Delaware. And it's become highly important there, and I can follow it. I have family members there, one's a nurse who runs it, but on the proximity, I'm right there, I understand.
Yeah.
And that really makes, as to Kathy's point, it makes you feel really good.
Yeah. Thank you,
Adrienne,
Adrienne.
has anyone written a book on you yet? Have you done your biography?
I've been begged to, and forgive me for saying that. Everybody says, yeah, and I say, well, if you think it's worth it, you can write it and I'll give you, I'll be interviewed. But I guess that's the woman in me who says, moi, do I have a story?
You definitely do.
Well, we know
follow
the
up on
men who write about themselves, but never mind.
We've got a couple of questions. Is Diane there? Diane Schrader, you had a question on strategy. Hi,
Yeah.
Diane.
Thank you. And it's been such a fascinating conversation because I hear so much about the giving and such. Whereas if you look at the data, most of the capital in philanthropy is actually invested. There's certainly an amount that goes out for grants and giving in any given year. So I'm curious to hear from you both what your strategy is for those investment dollars. Maybe these are dollars that were given into family foundations or put into a donor advised fund, but how do you see how that capital is deployed differently from the giving strategies?
Well, I'll jump in and say, I've turned my giving over from day one, my accountant and my investment advisors. And I said, just make me as much money as you can because I want to give it away. Here's my baseline running rate. I want to be able to buy art, for example, or a few other things, but make me this much money. But the key, I would say, and Kathy, I'm sure can talk about this, the basis of investing is how much risk do you want to take? Based on how much risk you want to take will determine whether you get junk bonds, bitcoins, or General Electric, which is actually not good. In the olden days, it was General Electric. And I push myself to say, I want to take larger risk. I mean, I just don't want some annuity that is guaranteed, blah, blah. And I'm already out of my area when I start talking about this. But investing, I think you'd say, is determined by how much risk you want to take.
Yeah.
And
I would agree with Adrienne. I think that one of the issues that women also have is that we tend not to be comfortable with risk, or we don't understand it well enough to understand that sometimes not investing is actually more of a risk than investing. So one of the things that we try to do is frame it for clients. This is long-term money. So this is not, you're going to hopefully grow this money for a long period of time and be able to use the growth or the dividends and interest off the money to gift every year. And as long as you understand that the markets can go up and down, but over a long period of time, we can go through those markets and navigate through those markets and stay invested and, move, little differences too, but you want to stay in the markets and growing. And it is based on your individual risk, but it's also going to have to be based on what are your goals for that money for the future. And if it's giving and you're putting it in a donor advised fund or you're putting it into a foundation, if you want to grow that money so you can give the most possible way. So it's the risk reward, and it's got to be measured. And
I'd also say, I think I'm unique, meaning I have no children, I have no heirs, I don't have anybody in any area outside that I'd either take care of and I think that's pretty rare. It's neither good nor bad, but it is. So I'm not making light at all of people who have other considerations when it comes to giving. There are many things that have to be taken into account, and I just don't have those. Some of that was my own choice about how I chose to live my life, because I thought that I wouldn't be good at parenting and grandparenting and some other things. I'm in complete awe of every woman who's done that. But planning, from my standpoint, is a little easy, and I could see anybody saying, well, she doesn't ever have to worry. But it is about risk, exactly, and how people are comfortable with that. I have a terror of physical discomfort, not even going to pain, and an absolute terror. I have a friend of mine, a woman, brilliant. She almost summited Everest. She's an alpine skier. And she says she has no physical fear. She bungee jumped. And of course, I immediately said, you did what? And she said, Adrienne, you can be killed crossing the highway 10 times more likely than being injured bungee jumping. She measures risk, and she's right. I did not go jump off the bridge bungee jumping, but in fact, how one deals with risk is the point.
And the other point, just a real quick jump on to what Adrienne said too, is once you do decide what that amount is that you want to give away and that can be invested for long term, we find a lot of clients like to also invest in areas that align with their values or priorities. So we're seeing a lot more of impact investing and ESG, environmental social governance investing as well. So those dollars are making differences in many different ways.
And I would add that in my funding of the Resilience Center, it was the Adrienne Arsht Resilience Center, and Rockefeller Foundation turned over their area of that and asked me and my group we each put in $30 million. So much of the focus is on climate and heat as the silent killer. And we've proposed naming heat waves. There's so much today, exactly as you're saying, that is about the environment, our future, what we're going to have, and whether polar bears. I did a dessert for the opening of the Resilience Center, and I got a white chocolate polar bear and put it on a scoop of ice cream that I had, vanilla ice cream rolled in coconut, and put the polar bear on it to remind us that the glaciers and the ice is melting so much that the animals, the bears, are getting stuck and they can't migrate. They can't even get off these floating things. So the interest in climate change and all of that is, I would suggest, a totally new area for philanthropy that is really being driven, I think, by a younger generation.
It's a great point, and I love the metaphor for the dessert and bringing that to life. I'd like to get into another question. Denitha Doe. Denitha, are you there?
Hi, thank you for the spirited conversation. I'm curious if Adrienne and Kathleen, if you could speak to the scarcity money mindset that can be present, particularly within women. We talked a lot about how women can be risk averse, and I believe some of that could be because of their upbringing or societal messages that will prevent them from wanting to invest or to increase their philanthropic giving. So could you speak to what your advice would be to other women who may feel that they're fearful of becoming a poor bag lady, or they're scared of taking on that risk?
Well, I'd jump in and say it's not how you were raised. I had wonderful conversations with literally, Jane Fonda and I were at an event together, and we were talking about it and how she, Anna Annenberg's daughter. I mean, these are billionaires, or they're terrified of being a bag lady. It's not your environment. Well, let me suggest, I don't think it's your upbringing. I think it's your DNA. And I think we're very fortunate that there is a part of a species that is risk averse when it comes to money, household, somebody has to make sure that it isn't all gambled away or lost, or the yin and yang of the men for whom risk is a delicious challenge, and for which women are more risk averse, is the nature of it. And I would answer your question by saying, get used to it, deal with it. And yes, every single day I'm afraid, and I write checks and I'm afraid, but I do it because somewhere I think I will get through it, and I've gotten through it so far, but I don't think it changes my fears.
Kathy, what's your thought?
Yeah, I do think pushing through the fear and is a good idea to try that as well. I think that the problem is a lot of times we look at a lot of the backdrop that Adrienne said is true. Like, we're the caretakers. You know, we want to take care of everything. And one of the things we have to take care of is the money, and that's protect and preserve it. And so we put it under the mattress or put it in the safe deposit box, or, but also we look at it, we need to think about it qualitatively too, you know, not just quantitatively. Like, we need to think about, like, okay, if we're going to want to have these certain things occur in our lifetime, we want to buy a house, we want to get married, maybe have children, maybe, you know, go on vacations, whatever those goals are, it does cost money. And look at money as just a tool. It's just a way to get to where you need to be, and just start really figuring out why you're having these, you know, challenges, or what's holding you back, and either uncover them or fight through them. Because at the end of the day, if we're not taking those calculated risks, the risk is that we're going to be left behind.
I was going to say that, can I use your phrase? I love change, but change is uncomfortable for everybody. I'm known for buying a new house about every 4 years, and I adore change. I look at change as an opportunity to leave behind the mess and try something new. But sharing your words, Kathy, and I say to people, if you don't like change, wait till you see irrelevance.
I love that, Adrienne. Thank you so much. There were lots of other questions, so I'm sorry if we haven't got to them all, but I just wanted to say that was such an enlightening and open conversation. And Adrienne and Kathy, thank you so much for such a brilliant discussion. It was spirited and transparent and honest, and it's fascinating exploring this topic of the role that women play in giving and philanthropy. So thank you very much, Adrienne. And a big thank you to you, Kathy, for being our partner for this series. We started it last March, and little did we know we'd be running it for a year. And it really has been a brilliant series, and really brought to life some of the topics and challenges, key challenges of our time, I think. People's ability to pivot, leading with purpose, innovation, digital transformation, and the importance of building a more inclusive, impactful, diverse economy, workforce, and society. So I've loved these conversations. And most importantly, thanks to everyone that's joined us for this series and joined us today. Thank you for your great questions. Please do feedback to us or reach out to us. We'd love to hear your comments at email community@worth.com. And then next week, we have our 3-day virtual Women in Worth Summit kicking off at 1 p.m. March 2nd and running through to Thursday afternoon. The theme is Actions Speak Louder Than Words. And we're really spotlighting leaders and brands and businesses that are walking the talk when it comes to greater diversity and inclusion. And we've got some brilliant speakers, including Kathy, who will be on the session on Thursday around networking in the new normal. So it's open to everyone, and tickets are complimentary. So please register for that today. We'll put the link in the, I think Molly's just put the link in the chat there, or you can visit worth.com/events.
And I'd say, Kathy, let's get together offline and at least write an article.
I would love to do that. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that, yes. And you have such a brilliant story, Adrienne. So yeah, I'm thrilled you two are connected. Thank you both again, and enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks again, Kathy, as well.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Adrienne. Thanks, Juliet. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.